Roland, anytime.
Thank you. Today is April the 11th, 2006, and we're here to do an interview with Noreen Forde. In the room also, recording is Hillary Carita, and our cameraman today is Kevin Collins. So, hi Noreen.
Hi, Peg.
I'm going to start off just real simple questions to start off with. What's your name?
Noreen Forde.
And what's your maiden name?
Reagan.
Reagan. And do you have any idea how your name was chosen? Were you named for someone?
As my first name,
Yeah.
I was called after an auntie. And they gave me more than one name, of course. She was a sister in the convent, and I got 3 of her names. So
What are they?
Nora Christina Aquinas. You don't really need to know that.
and whose sister was she?
She was my mum's sister. Now, they were from the west of Ireland in County Mayo, so that's where my mum came from.
Okay.
My dad was West Cork.
And you came from, tell me the whole thing, the parish, the whole business.
I'm from Townland, Bruley, and the village is Glandore, which is 3 miles from where we lived. And that's right down in West Cork at the edge of the cliffs.
At the edge of the cliffs.
Yes.
Is it close to the sea?
We're right by the water.
Right by the water.
Yeah.
Nice. And were you born at home or in a hospital?
I was born in a hospital, in a private nursing home, actually, in County Galway. My parents had lived in Galway and Barna for a period of 3 years. I was born there. And they moved back to London, and there was a few more of my siblings born in London, and they came back to West Cork, to my father's home place, when I was 4 years old.
So you really consider yourself a Cork person?
Oh, yes.
Regardless of
Very
where you were
much.
born. And would you tell us the date of your birth?
I was born 6/11/60.
6/11/60. And you said now, you already mentioned that some of your siblings were born in England. How many siblings were there altogether?
There was 8 of us, a total of 8 of us. My older brother, my parents met in England, in London. They had my eldest brother in Harrow, and they moved back to Galway after he was born, and they had another brother, and I was born there. And then they returned to London, where there were 3 more children born, and they came back to Ireland and had 2 more.
2 more. Now, would you name off the kids and tell me where they are now?
Okay, my older brother, Christopher Regan, he's married and settled in Mallow in County Cork. My second brother, John Regan, he is a single bachelor in West Cork, down where I come from, in Glandore. My third brother, Timothy Regan, he is living in West Cork. He's a fisherman. And my sister, Helen, she is married and has returned 3 years ago from London with her husband to West Cork, back to our home place with 3 children. And my other brother, Mihal, he has always lived at home, and his wife and 2 children. And then I have a younger sister, Frances, who has returned from London also to West Cork, and her 2 children. And my younger brother is married and living in Ballinamore in County Leitrim.
Wow. Wow. So that means you're the only one that's actually come.
I'm the traveller.
You're the traveller, is
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Does that make you feel, how's that make you feel about being here when they're all back there?
There's times, especially since I got married and have 2 children of my own now, there's times you think, okay, we're missing out on quite a lot with the kids and grandparents, cousins. But you make up for that in the summertime. This summer I'll be going home for 2 months of the summer with my 2 kids. So they're that's the good thing. You can go back.
Yeah. And there's plenty of places to stay, obviously.
Oh, please. You can stay in everybody's house. I mean, there's no problem. There's no problem with the digs.
And where you're now, you said you went back to your father's home place. Was that?
That was his original home place, where my grandmother and grandfather had married and lived there and reared their family.
So, and how far back? Do you have any idea how far back the generations go in that area?
My grandfather was a Regan that was the original home place. He would have been born back in the 1800s. I mean, it goes back quite a long way. Yeah.
So,
my great-grandfather, I wouldn't have enough for that history, no.
Yeah.
No.
And your mother's maiden name was what?
She was Dolan.
Dolan. And she came from Mayo.
Outside of Ballina in County Mayo. And her mother was originally from Ballina, and her father also. And there again, her great grandfather was from Cavan.
Oh my goodness.
So it goes
Yeah.
back into Cavan as well on that side.
Yeah. Now you said they met in England. Your
Met
parents met in
in
England.
Wheelstone Harrow, they were married in London.
So they both had gone over to
They
England
both
for
immigrated
working.
and met there, yeah.
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 Wow.
So
Now, chances of them meeting in Ireland were probably pretty slim.
they'd have never met there, I don't think. Me on Cork. No.
Yeah. And what was your mother's maiden name? Oh, you said
She was Dolan.
Dolan.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Did she work outside the home? I know she met. Oh, obviously.
Well, when they met in London, she had worked in factories. You know, they didn't have the same education as people today because school was short for them and they just immigrated. She worked in factories. My dad worked for a farmer in London at the time. And then when they moved back to Ireland, she was a stay-at-home mom. She had 8 children. She worked hard.
And what was your home like? Was it a farm?
We moved back to a farm, a small farm. It was a struggle, a big struggle for both my parents having to come back. Now that I'm older and realise that, they came home to a house with no running water, no electricity. And I can remember coming home from London, even though I was quite a young child. And we came on the boat and we were picked up by a neighbour and driven to West Cork. And we arrived at this house where my grandmother was still living and an uncle of mine. And it was scary for us as young kids. No electric in the house, no water in the house. We were just totally thrown off. You could see a mice running around the floor and you were like, oh my, where are we living? That's the type of a home you went home to.
Yeah.
It was tough. It was tough for my parents.
And what made the decision?
My uncle at the time he was diagnosed with diabetes, and his mum, who was my grandmother, sent a letter to my dad and asked him to come over and take over the home place because he wasn't fit to do it any longer.
Yeah.
So that's why he returned there.
Yeah. Had your father come from a large family too?
Family of 9 siblings. Yeah.
But they had all kind of scattered.
They were all immigrated, yeah.
Yeah.
And they came to the States here, out to Boston and London, a lot of them.
Now, you said you were off just seeing an aunt in
Yes,
Boston.
my dad's sister, yes,
Yeah.
she's still in Boston.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice. So so they came back, but then they left again and went back to London?
No, when they came home when I was 4 years of age, they stayed in West Cork.
That was it.
Yeah,
They
that
made
was
the
it.
commitment to stay
That was the
there.
commitment that my
Yeah.
dad made to his mother, yeah.
Wow. And so your mother, your grandmother, and your uncle then still remained
But
in
my
the house?
uncle, he moved on. He went back over to London because he would have got more care medical-wise. And my grandmother lived with us. And she was with us until she passed on. I mean, she was a lovely lady. And we learned a lot from her about the culture around because it was so new to us as little kids. And she was a really good woman. You know, she took us out and she did what she could for us because it was a struggle for my parents.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How big of a farm is it?
The time they took it over, my dad took over the home place, I'm going to say they had about 14 acres of ground, which was very rugged and wasn't what you'd make a living off of.
Yeah.
They did have cattle, they milked and we did butter and we did a lot of cultural things that we had to do. We had hens, we had all this for eggs, you know, my father, he done some fishing. And after a couple of years, he was in the building trade. He did everything he could to keep the family functioning, everybody going. So he actually ended up as a council gangerman in the county council working on the roads. And he did that. That was his
So he was
for
trying
years.
to do two jobs at one time, really.
He was doing a lot.
Yeah. And did the farm expand over the years?
It did expand. They actually did expand it. There was people immigrating and selling properties at the time, I suppose, and they ended up buying a local farm that was attached to the property they already had. So they ended up with like 42 acres.
Oh, so that was
Yeah,
much more
it was still
sustainable.
tough because there was a lot of rugged land there. We're right on the edge of the water, so you can imagine a lot of cliff.
Yeah.
You know.
If you were standing in the doorway of your home, where you grew up, and looking out, what describe to me? What would you see out in front?
Well, because it's an old home, and years ago when people built homes, they built them down in hollows for shelter. So we live in a house that's literally buried under the road. We would say at home, it's it's so low down under the road, it's unreal, and lots of trees around it at the time when we were kids because it's for shelter. But the homes today, they're just literally building them on the edge of the cliffs.
Picking
Scenery.
the views, right?
Yeah, there's some beautiful views. So when you look out my front door, you're looking at a big wall, and then it's like a retaining wall, and up there is just a big field of grass in front of the house. Now, in later years, my mum has done a lot of gardening and landscaping there, so it looks a lot prettier now. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Um, and it was not in a village. Your nearest
No.
neighbors would not have been very close by.
Our closest neighbours would have been like 5 minutes walk for us. You know, a local house but he was the local postman actually. We lived near us, and when we would go to school, we travelled. He had a little car which we didn't have, and what he did, he would come by the house when he'd be heading for work in the morning. He'd take as many as possible in the car with him. He'd run us, he'd be heading for the village to the local post office, and he would drop us at a crossroad which would take us closer to the school, and we would walk.
How far were you from school?
We were like 4 miles.
Wow. And so you were expected to
That
walk
was
that 4 miles to
oh
school
yes,
each day and
yeah.
back.
Well, we would have shortcuts. We'd cross fields, and we had pathways made to shorten our journey. So, but more often than not, he would pick us up in the morning. But we would always have to walk the whole way home.
How about bicycles? Were you able to ride bicycles?
Well, they couldn't afford to buy them for us.
Well,
If you got a bicycle, you were doing very well.
yeah.
So when we went to secondary school, we would have a bicycle because we had to cycle then also to get a bus to go to secondary school. We cycled like 4 to 5 miles. You'd throw your bike at the side of the ditch, you'd jump on the bus and travel the rest of the way into town to your secondary school.
What was the town that you went to for secondary?
Well, when I did first and second grade in middle school, I went to Skibbereen Tech, and then in my third year I went to Rosscarbery to the convent. I was moved down to the convent in Ross. It was closer for us to travel.
What was school like?
For me, I wasn't one of those good students, so I was anxious to get out of it fairly quick. At that time when I went to school, you could do your group cert, you could finish after the second year or third year. Well, I did inter-cert, which was third year, and that was my school days finished. So I finished school at the age of 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were really young,
Yeah. And I was very ambitious to become a hairstylist, and I actually immigrated to Luton in England at the age of 16 and done my apprenticeship.
Where did you go?
I stayed with family members. I had an uncle-in-law and his children I stayed with.
Wow.
And did my 3-year apprenticeship, and I returned after that back to Dublin. So
To Dublin.
yeah.
Did you when you came? I know you were only 4 when you came from England, and it was kind of a scary experience. You said, but did you always have it kind of in your mind that you weren't going to be staying in that area, or was it something that came to you as you got older?
It just came to me as I got older. You know, I could see school wasn't for me, and I guess my parents didn't push anybody for school. It wasn't like today. You know, education was so important today. Like, we were kind of pushed on and said, okay, if you can go out and work, you can go out and work. You know, but preferably near home. But when I got this in my head, there was no stopping. I had to go. But my mum was quite happy, and Dad were at the time, because I was going to be a helping hand in the home I was going to also. They had lost their mum at a young age, the children, and I would have been like a step in there to help out.
Yeah. What kind of what was your day? Just pick any age you want and tell me what was a day like for you when you were a kid. What would you do from the time you got up?
We'll say on a Saturday morning when I was a kid, there was no school. I'd be up first thing in the morning, and I was the older of a lot of siblings. I was the third eldest, the eldest girl, so you had a lot of chores. So Saturday morning, my chores would have been baking bread, Irish bread, which my grandmother taught me to do. A lot of clothes to be washed. There was no fancy way of washing them. It was a lot of it by hand. We did have an old spin machine, which we used. And we would hang them on the hedge to dry them, or on a clothesline if you had one, luckily. And we used to take out, our floors in the house were cement. And we would take the kitchen furniture, like chairs, tables, whatever we could remove, into the yard. And you would get on your knees and hands and you would scrub the kitchen floor. You would clean. And they were chores I did when my mum was doing chores on the land, helping my dad. Or maybe they had to go to do some errands in the town on a Saturday together.
Yeah. And would you be the only one scrubbing the floor, or would you get
My
a team?
grandmother
Your grandmother
would help me.
And
I was the older girl, so.
and now while you're down there and scrubbing away, would you? You had a close relationship with your grandmother.
Oh, I did.
What kind of stuff would you be talking about when you were doing that?
You'd have a little scrubbing brush in one hand. There was no rubber gloves, and the closest to detergent would have been probably some of the washing powder used on the clothes, or Dettol. We didn't have running water, as I said, so we had to go to the well for buckets of water, and that was one of your chores. When Saturday evening would come, it was bath time for everybody in the house, so we had a big enamel bath that we would bring in, and you would boil saucepans of water on the stove, and one bath of water did everybody.
Everybody.
Yes.
How was the pecking order? Who got to go first?
And me being the older siblings took care of themselves, but me being the older sister, I had, if Mum wasn't there, Mum was busy, I had to get one by one into that tub and get them washed down and get them out and get them ready for bed. And then they'd have to get their shoes and line them up for Sunday morning, and Granny and I would sit and polish them for the night at the fire.
And when you're sitting and talking now, what would you talk about with your grandmother? Would that be to the time you'd really bond, I would think?
We did bond a lot. She would tell me stories of days of old when she had children, her own children, and what they did, and she would compare us to them, and she was very, she had a lot of old tales to tell us about different things where people would come to homes and tell stories, and that was kind of gone when we got there, when that our age group. But she told us a lot of stories of older people, that neighbours that lived by her and what they did, and as her kids grew up, what they did and how they worked. And she was very close to my dad, so she was always telling the tales on Dad. They were good ones.
Yes, yeah.
But that was her golden boy, obviously, so she told lots of stories about him, which were good.
Can you remember any story that really stands out in your mind that she would have been talking about?
She would have talked to me a lot about him. He was very close with his father, my grandfather. They did go fishing a lot. He was a right character around the place. He was well known. He had. She did tell me one story that sticks out in my head. Where they were on it. A lot of people didn't have transport, but they went to a lot of fairs and regattas, which were held close by in villages and towns. And he was on a return trip with somebody that had a truck, and where they had an accident, and how he got toppled out of it or whatever. And she always put that down to he had always suffered with his arm or his shoulder, and she would always say, "Oh well, that's what happened to him there," or something, And you kind of were just so engrossed in what she told you, believed her, you believed all these stories. But older people had ways of thinking that's what happened and that's why it's like that, Yeah. But there was no running to hospitals or anything like that.
Were there any interesting characters that were in your area that would come by the house?
Yes, we did. We had a lot of, what we called them when we were kids was tinkers. Today they're the travelling people.
Yes.
But we would think, as children, we thought it was a lot of fun to see. If we seen the trap coming and the pony on it or a donkey, whatever, we were so excited to see what the tinkers would bring. Because more often than not, they had a shawl or a basket and something in under it. They'd be looking for money or looking for sugar or tea. And it would be a trade-off that Granny would do with them more often than not. And flowers probably, and God only knows what they were giving you mightn't have come from their house. It was probably somebody else had given to them and they would give it back to you in trade of sugar or tea or whatever. But they were good memories to have. And we also had a local man that had a local shop with a cart and a pony. And we really looked forward to Andy coming because we knew we'd get sweets. Granny would buy probably a crunchy bar, maybe 2 of them for 8 of us, and she'd get the knife and divide it. And you would sit there licking that for the evening. That was good to get that.
Yeah.
The memories are good.
And so he would travel with his cart filled
He
with
travelled locally. Yeah. He was like a shop or a pony and trap, a pony and cart on it. He would bring like the dry foods. A lot, it saved the people travelling that had no transport. You either walked or cycled at the time.
To get to
to get to it. And the closest store to you would have been, like in the village, 3 miles. And in winter time, you can imagine. So he did it. That was his business.
Was it like an enclosed cart or was it an open?
It was. He had it fixed up that he had made little boxes along the sides where seats would have been in the trap, obviously, and he put lids on it and lift up lids, and he covered it over. And he had a lot of stuff. He just sat in the front, but he'd get off when he'd arrive, and he'd take the cover off, whatever he had over it, and he'd have little cardboard boxes dividing everything out, and he had all his little stuff in there for everyone, whatever you wanted, sugar, tea, the dry stuff.
Yeah, I bet that was really exciting.
Yeah.
To see that.
We had a local creamery also, which wasn't as far as the village, and you would get bread and milk and things like that. But more often than not, you didn't have to buy milk because we had our own. We milked cows.
Yeah. Did you also give milk to the creamery? I mean, did you?
We
sell
did.
milk?
We did milk to the creamery, but not a lot. Maybe one churn. And a neighbour always took it because my dad at that time had gone back working on the county council. So
How did your dad get to work?
he invested in a Honda 50, little moped. So that was his way of transport. Yeah, for many years.
Did he have to wait till the kids were a little older to be able to do that so that
He
the farm kept going? Or?
No, but my older brothers would help him out a lot with the farm, and my mum did a lot of outdoor work also. My mum would do as much as my dad did, digging potatoes down to milking cows or whatever had to be done.
Now the cows, how many cows did you have?
We had four cows, yeah, and we all had our own pet, and they all had names, and we had a lot of fun growing up with them. And then we had local neighbours that had pigs, and we didn't keep pigs, but if the mother of the pig had too many little ones, she would give them to us, the little baby. And you would rear it in your kitchen in a little wooden box by the stove. And what we actually did was we put holes in the box. We would feed them with baby's bottles of milk. And that was a lot of fun too. With a lot of memories of that. Maybe she'd have given us 4 little pigs and maybe one lived because we used to overfeed them. We just thought it was,
It was so much
you just
fun.
keep feeding them.
And then what? At a certain age, you would give them back.
No, she let you keep them. If you reared it, you kept it. Because the mother of the pig, the little ones couldn't rear them. Yeah. She'd farrow too many pigs, and we reared them on bottle feed, and if they lived, you were lucky. I think we had 1 or 2 that survived.
And now would they then be butchered later on?
Well, that was the sad story. That was the end of their life. That was the hard part. They'd be reared in the tea chest, what they called it, in the wooden box by the fire, and when they got any bit bigger, then they were put out into an outhouse. And there were always pets with us kids, but they could turn nasty too. They could get very, there would be attack. So they would be kept in a pen or whatever, and sure enough, they would disappear. You come from school someday and they'd be gone. You'd be eating them out of the pot the next day.
Oh, jeez. At least you didn't have to take part in the ceremony.
Oh no, you didn't have anything to do with that. They just take him into the butchers, and that was the end of him.
Oh, jeez. What kind of things did you do for fun when you were a kid?
Well, we didn't have a TV at home. We had a little radio. But as we grew up as children, we would play outside. We could just get a couple of 10 boxes out of the garbage, what we say today, and we would just fill them with dirt and stones, and we would play shop, we would play family, we would play with our dolls, but anything like that. And we used to just run around with each other and play in the grounds at the house. We didn't have a lot of toys, but we really entertained ourselves with jump ropes and made your own swing out of tires on trees, and there was no swing sets, there was none of that. Yeah, but in the summer we were lucky because we were by the water, and we could go down to what we called the strand, and the older ones would take care of the little ones. It wasn't like your parents were with you. I often think of it today, but we took care of each other. Now, we didn't learn to swim.
You never learned to swim?
No, never learned to swim. There was none of that. If you got a tire put around you and you got ducked in, you float on that, and you learned from there if you were good enough to learn. But there was no swim lessons, nothing like that. So I could honestly say out of the 8 of us, maybe 4 of us can swim.
And are you one of them?
No, I'm not.
No. Never been interested in swimming?
I have been interested now that I have my children, but it's getting up there. Maybe I'm too late.
No.
I'll just have to have a go at it. I'll promised my son Timothy, who's at the moment taking lessons. I said, "Yeah, Mommy, learn."
Now the regattas, you were talking about the regatta races. Did your brothers?
Well, yes, they took part. My dad was into it. He was very involved in the regatta, the local regatta in Glandore village. They used to have a main boat out in the harbour that would announce the races. They had 1 hour race, 2 hour race, and he would be involved in the races, but organising it also. A lot of my brothers, some of my sister, youngest sister, did do it as well. They got more into it. I didn't. I was a little bit iffy about water, so I didn't. But yes, there was a lot of fun on Regatta Day, and it still goes. It still happens.
I hear about regattas.
Oh yeah,
It
West
seems
Cork
like
is noted for it.
Yeah, and even the people that are in the regattas are not necessarily swimmers. Is that right?
That's true. And a lot of fishermen aren't swimmers, and there's a lot of fishermen down there. My brother actually is not a swimmer, and he has his own trawler. They don't have fear, though. A lot of them don't have the fear, you say.
And they don't even wear life jackets when they're out there?
Well, they're supposed to, but more today they're supposed to. But years and years ago, no, there was no such thing. Yeah, it's a tough
your dad
life.
also did fishing.
He did from his own little boat. Yeah.
Was it more just for the family fishing?
Yes, he would do it and a hobby of his own, It was something he enjoyed to do because when he was growing up as a kid, his dad did it. All his people did it. There's a lot of funny stories on fishing. There's a lot of poaching goes on. And there's been a couple of instances where my dad, he had a lot of tricks of the old trade, and he would go out and throw his net and he'd haul in his couple of salmon, but he would have to, hide them. Because you could be searched when you come ashore. You could have the Navy could be there. They can follow you at sea. They can come by your boat and ask to get on board. Depending on the boat you have, they can ask to see what you've hauled in.
Well, isn't the sea just available for
Oh
anybody?
no. Oh no. There's laws, and it's changed. It's not like years and years ago. You can't go out and poach salmon and lobster. You have to be, and you can get people that could haul other people's pots and take lobster as well. And crab.
Is it like licensed now or something?
Oh yeah, you have to be covered. There's a lot of different laws at the sea now, and there's limits to how far out and all the rest of it they can go, and it depends on the size of the boat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I recall lots of stories about poaching salmon. I ate some of them, I can tell you, they were lovely. But I mean, yes, a lot of it went on.
So if you saw someone coming towards you, I guess the fish would be back in the water fairly quickly, would they?
Oh, well, you'd do something with it. You wouldn't be caught. You wouldn't be hanging around with it. You get off that boat, you moved. You didn't hang around the pier.
Yeah.
You got it at home or got rid of it wherever you were going to sell it.
Yeah, very quickly. Huh? Yeah. When you got to be a teenager, what was it like to be a teenager in a small farm area?
There was quite a bit. We had youth clubs, which would be in a local hall, and we'd have a disco. There was no such thing as drinking or smoking or boyfriends or girlfriends. You might imagine you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But we did a lot like that, and then there'd be youth clubs for the teen once you became a teenager, and it depended on how strict your parents were. We weren't allowed to go every Friday or Saturday night when it'd be on, maybe once a month. They couldn't afford to let us go.
Oh, it was a cost to go?
Well, at that time it seemed a lot of money, I guess, whatever it cost to go. I mean, it was the old currency. I remember the old half crown, all that kind of currency, and we used that. But and I also recall when my mom sent me to an after school